I've hated my mother-in-law since the first time I met her. I knew that she would never accept me as part of her family, and this feeling of dislike was mutual. Her icy gaze and dry comments always left behind a barely noticeable taste of humiliation, as if she wanted to remind me that I was nothing to her. But this time she went too far, bringing me to the point where I couldn't hold back anymore. You might think that I'm a sweet, caring person, harmless as a kitten. But my mom taught me an important lesson. When someone is mean and unfair, you have to be able to stand up for yourself, even if it requires a dirty fight. And so, my mother-in-law, whom I sometimes referred to as the family tornado, decided to test my boundaries, assuming that I would remain passive. This time she was wrong. My husband works in the film industry, doing the technical part of filming. His job involved constant travel, and one of its few advantages was the opportunity to travel with him sometimes. This time, he invited his mother and me to join him in New Caledonia, a picturesque corner that seemed like the perfect place to relax. This trip had been planned for a long time, and I was diligently engaged in organizing, booking tickets, collecting documents, coordinating all the little things. Everything was thought out to the smallest detail. Even my mother-in-law, in her usual way of always being late and causing chaos, managed to get to the airport on time this time. That in itself seemed like a miracle. We unloaded our bags from the car. I checked the luggage to make sure nothing was forgotten. Everything was going smoothly until my mother-in-law offered to drop off my luggage at the check-in desk, leaving this task to me. I clearly separated my carry-on and checked bags, then politely asked her to do the same so there would be no confusion. At this stage, I already began to feel a slight tension, her irritated tone, sighs and dissatisfaction, as if I was offering her not to hand over her luggage, but my dignity. "Go through the security check, I'll catch up," I said, trying to keep a polite smile on my face. She walked silently towards the hallway, not even deigning to look at me. When I finished checking in and went through the security check, she was nowhere to be seen. Looking around the airport, I realized that the situation was starting to take a strange turn. I noticed her from afar. Her mother-in-law was standing against the wall and frantically searching for something in her bag. Her hands were shaking, her face was tense, as if she expected something terrible to happen now. When I approached, she raised her head and, without even greeting me, blurted out that one of her handbags was missing, the one that contained her diabetes medicine. Her voice was full of panic, her eyes glistened with incipient tears. She insisted that she could not continue the journey without this medicine. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and suggested that she remember if she had left her bag at the check-in desk along with the rest of her luggage. Her response was chaotic. She was muttering something, losing the thread of thought, and looked even more agitated. Seeing no other way out, I agreed to go back to the baggage check-in desk to check if her bag was still there. The staff member at the counter was kind, but his response was disappointing. There were no extra bags or luggage that could match the description of the mother-in-law. He assured me that all the bags were properly registered and sent for sorting. Feeling increasingly annoyed, I headed back to the security check area, where I hoped to find my mother-in-law again. But then the situation changed. 2 security personnel approached me on the way. They looked serious, almost threatening, and politely but insistently asked me to follow them. I tried to find out what was the matter, but they only dryly informed me that they would explain everything in a separate area. I was taken to a small room, sterile and devoid of any friendliness. There I was informed that I had received a complaint from a passenger who claimed that she had heard me utter the words "weapons" and "drugs." She was supposedly afraid that I might pose a threat. For a moment, I was speechless with amazement. It was so absurd that I didn't immediately realize the scale of what was happening. The airport staff announced that they were obliged to investigate and offered me cooperation. Everything was boiling inside me, but I knew that emotions would only make things worse. I agreed to the search and the grueling questions that went on endlessly. Every hour I felt more humiliated, and the anger hidden deep inside grew like a heated cauldron. Finally, After 18 grueling hours of checks, I was acquitted. The officer who broke the news to me looked confused, but professional nonetheless. I took advantage of the moment and showed him a photo of my mother-in-law, asking if she was the same woman who reported my alleged threat. He looked at the photo, frowned, and confirmed my worst suspicions. It really was her. This news overwhelmed me with a wave of rage. I imagined my mother-in-law, with a cold and perhaps even satisfied expression on her face, sitting somewhere waiting for her plan to work. But she did not consider that her intrigues could have consequences. I walked out of the security area, feeling anger literally boiling inside me. This time she went too far. All her previous sarcastic remarks, humiliating remarks, and constant interference in my life could be forgiven, but the charge of terrorism is the limit. When I got home, I decided it was time to strike back. Her mother-in-law adored her reputation. It was her main trophy, her fortress, which she had been building for years. She was proud of her surroundings, where everyone tried to impress with luxury and status. Her house was a museum of vanity, her words were pompous, and her actions were calculated for the approval of others. And I knew that there was only one way to destroy this fortress: to expose her hypocrisy in front of her own friends. I came up with the idea to invite my mother-in-law's neighbors to tea. I knew that many of them harbored barely concealed envy for her and at the same time longed to see her weakness. The evening was carefully prepared. There were treats from the local bakery on the table, which my mother-in-law so often passed off as her own creations. I ordered exactly the same delicacies that she called imported. When all the guests had gathered, I calmly began a story about her so-called rare finds and culinary masterpieces. The reaction of those present was the one I was counting on. However, I'm not done yet. I was supposed to catch a plane back to Portland that day, but an unexpected development left me at my mother-in-law's house, where one of the most intense conversations in my life took place. My father-in-law, noticing my unexpected visit, asked perplexedly why I hadn't left, and I felt that the moment had come to tell him the whole truth. Taking a deep breath, I told him that he needed to know something important. The words came out of me like a seething torrent, and I finally told him the whole story. During our recent trip to the Bahamas, my mother-in-law had an affair with one of the assistant directors. My husband found out about this from a colleague who accidentally caught the two of them in the prop room. He wanted to keep it a secret, not wanting to be the one to ruin his parents' marriage. But after my mother-in-law gave me a real hell, especially her despicable act at the airport, I no longer felt a moral obligation to protect her. Her actions were unfair, and her hypocrisy deserved to be exposed. My father-in-law listened to me in silence, his face gradually paled, and his eyes darkened with surging emotions. I told everything in as much detail as possible, leaving no room for ambiguity. When I finished, there was an oppressive silence in the room. He didn't say anything for a long time, then briefly thanked me for my frankness and left. I knew that my mother-in-law would return home the next day and face the consequences of her actions. Despite the satisfaction of exposing her lies, I was tormented by a painful sense of guilt. Have I gone too far? Maybe my anger was excessive, and I hurt not only her, but also my husband, who, despite everything, is still her son. It took a week before I could put my thoughts together. During this time, my mother-in-law has already started a new campaign against me. She returned home earlier than expected and immediately began to plot. She told my husband that I had not gone to New Caledonia because I was tired of traveling all the time, and added that I allegedly no longer saw the point in such efforts for his sake. Her words were cunningly calculated to sow doubt in our relationship. It took me almost 3 hours to convince my husband that her story was a complete lie. I explained to him that I was delayed due to a confusion with the flight and could not contact him at the right time. But I decided not to mention the conversation with his father on the phone, especially after I revealed to him the secret of his mother's affair. And so, when my mother-in-law appeared at my house, she burst in like a storm, screaming and waving her arms. Her face was flushed with rage. She called me all sorts of names and said I was a mean and vindictive woman who never deserved her son. She accused me of destroying their family, claiming that karma would surely overtake me. There was such hatred in her eyes that I could see how she was on the verge of hitting me. But somehow she held back. Her outburst only inflamed my long-suppressed anger. I couldn't keep silent any longer and told her that she was lucky that I had limited myself to just that. If I really wanted revenge, the consequences would be much more devastating. I could press charges for the false statements my mother-in-law made against me at the airport. It would have been just retribution for the humiliation I had to go through, but I decided to do something else. After the confrontation at my house, I asked her to leave. It seemed that a sense of satisfaction should have followed this action, but, to my surprise, instead I felt devastation and even a certain amount of regret. 3 months have passed since that ill-fated meeting, and a lot has changed in that time. Her mother-in-law and father-in-law have been fighting non-stop since the truth about her affair came out. At first I thought it would be a temporary shock, but it soon turned out that my mother-in-law continued to date that man. Finally, she confessed to her father-in-law, and he, unable to stand it, kicked her out of the house. Now she was living with her sister, who, apparently, was the only person willing to provide her with shelter. The guilt started to eat away at me from the inside. I felt like I was the catalyst for the destruction of their marriage. To ease my burden, I went to talk to my father-in-law. He greeted me with a tired but calm look. When I tried to apologize for my part in revealing his wife, he gently but firmly said that I had nothing to apologize for. "This isn't the first time she's done this," he admitted with a heavy sigh. "But this is definitely the last one. We broke up, and I'm not going back to this marriage. She made her choice, and now she has to live with the consequences." His words did not bring me relief. Instead, they caused an even greater contradiction in my soul. They decided not to tell my husband about the divorce yet, asking me to keep it a secret until he returns home. The father-in-law wanted to tell his son this news personally, believing that it would be the right and respectful decision. When my husband finally returned a few weeks later, I could feel the tension literally hanging in the air. He spent several days not noticing the changes in his parents' relationship until his father-in-law gathered his courage and told him the truth. Surprisingly, my husband reacted to the news of the divorce with understanding, although it clearly hurt him. But when he found out that I was involved in this, he was upset. We were sitting in the kitchen, and I explained everything to him, starting with the incident at the airport, ending with how I discovered and disclosed his mother's affair. I apologized to him, admitting that I already felt guilty for my actions. "I never wanted it to go this far," I said, looking into his eyes. "I know it looks terrible, and I'm really sorry." Fortunately, my husband understood the situation. He said that the truth would have come out sooner or later anyway. Although there was still some tension between us, I hoped that things would get better over time. Now, looking back, I see that although my mother-in-law's actions were clearly wrong, my own actions could not be called flawless either. The attempt to expose her, to involve other people in it, and to strike at her reputation, it all looked petty and immature. Instead of trying to resolve our differences as adults, we both descended to the level of meaningless games. We were both guilty of creating chaos, and I honestly admit that we both deserved the consequences of this drama. But at the same time, I can't help but wonder, what now? I also wanted to share another story that continues to weigh on me. This situation started only a few months ago, but the consequences are still being felt in relations with my relatives, especially with my father. I am 21 years old and I have a 25-year-old cousin who recently got engaged. Her wedding was the focus of the whole family, and I tried to support her as much as I could until something happened that I still can't forget. In the process of preparing for the wedding, my aunt approached me with a request to borrow one of my most valuable jewelry, a diamond necklace that I inherited from my great-grandmother. This necklace is of great importance to me, not only because of its beauty, but also because of the connection with my great-grandmother, who was a special person in my life. This is the last thing I have left of her. Therefore, despite all the persuasions, I categorically refused. I explained that the necklace was too delicate and I didn't want to risk its safety. I offered my cousin another piece of jewelry, also beautiful and symbolic, which my grandfather gave me. But she was adamant about demanding this particular necklace. I had to be firm. I have clearly defined my boundaries and forbade anyone to touch this jewelry. However, on the day of the wedding, I noticed that my cousin was wearing a necklace that looked exactly like mine. My first reaction was rage, but I decided not to make a scene. It was her day, and I didn't want to ruin it. When I asked my mother about this, she sighed and told me that my cousin demanded the necklace so persistently that even after my refusal she continued to molest my father. In the end, tired of the pressure, he gave up and gave her the jewelry. Although I was angry, I couldn't blame my father. My cousin really knows how to be persistent. But after the wedding reception was over, I quietly approached her when she briefly took off the necklace and took it away without saying a word. I felt that I had done the right thing, because this piece of jewelry belonged to me. The next day, my cousin called me, crying into the phone, and accused me of stealing her jewelry. She claimed that the necklace was given to her by her husband, and her husband even threatened to file a police report. I tried to calmly explain that this necklace belongs to me and that she borrowed it without my permission. But he refused to believe me and called me a liar, saying that I offered the jewelry myself and now I'm trying to take it back. My mom, who was listening to this conversation, couldn't stand it and cut it off. Later, some of my relatives condemned me for taking the necklace without saying anything, and even called me selfish. They thought I should have just borrowed it for the wedding. I was accused of ruining my cousin's day, although I tried to do everything to avoid conflict. Now I am faced with a difficult choice: how to protect my belongings in the future. I need to talk to my father about not giving away my jewelry without my permission, but I do not know how to do this without aggravating our relationship. I have already asked him to give me the key to the safe where my jewelry is stored, but although he apologized for what happened, he still hesitates, fearing that I might lose this key or fail to cope with the responsibility. Recently, my aunt called and asked her son-in-law not to press charges. At the moment, the situation seems to have frozen, but it's hard for me to predict how things will turn out. I feel like I did the right thing by taking what belongs to me, but now I need to figure out how to prevent this from happening in the future. I'm not sure if I'm wrong in my actions, but one thing is for sure: getting back what was rightfully mine was a necessary step. Some may say that I could have handled this situation differently, that family conflicts could have been handled differently. But I think it's important to protect what's valuable to you, especially when it comes to things with deep personal meaning. The necklace that I inherited from my great-grandmother is not just a piece of jewelry. It is a symbol of connection with the past, the memory of a man I loved very much. The realization that my father handed it over without my knowledge and permission was a blow to me. I understand that he just wanted to avoid quarrels, but his act only made the situation worse. Now I think I should invest in a small safe to store my valuables. This will keep me from repeating such incidents in the future. Also, I'm thinking about asking my father to call my cousin and her husband to clarify the situation. Let him explain that I did not give permission to use the necklace, and that any accusations against me can be met with legal measures. I hate to think that my cousin may have been jealous of this decoration for a long time and used her wedding as an excuse to get what she wanted. Her actions seem especially ugly to me, considering that she is older than me and could have shown more maturity. But the story of the necklace is only part of what's on my mind. My sense of personal security was threatened once again, but this time in a different situation involving my sister. She is 24 years old, and she has been living with me for the last 3 years. I am happy to support her by providing accommodation for free, but we have established rules. One of the main things is that she can't invite men into the house, especially leaving them overnight. This rule is not just a formality. It is related to my deep fears, the roots of which are the unpleasant experience when someone tried to break into my house while I was alone. This incident left a scar on my soul, a feeling of vulnerability and distrust. Despite the rule, I've always been tolerant. Her friends, male or female, sometimes stayed the night with us, and I didn't mind because I knew them. But last week she crossed the line by bringing a strange man without my permission. She probably thought I was fast asleep and wouldn't notice anything. However, early in the morning I noticed an extra pair of men's shoes. Everything became clear, and I realized that someone was in my house. I went up to my sister and told her that her act was disrespectful and unacceptable. I warned her that if this happened again, she would have to move out. Her actions seemed to me not just a violation of the rules, but a betrayal of my trustfulness. When my mom found out about this, she decided that I was overreacting. She thinks that my sister just wants to enjoy life, and I should turn a blind eye to it. But she, like her sister, does not understand how much this incident has affected my feelings. For me, security in my own home is not a luxury, but a necessity. I love my sister and I want to help her, but her act went beyond all bounds. My request is clear and reasonable, and if she ignores it again, I will have to ask her to leave. It's not what I want, but I'm not ready to sacrifice my peace of mind for her temporary pleasures. I deeply appreciate all the advice and candid feedback that I have been given. Sometimes you need to hear an opinion from the outside in order to better understand how to do the right thing. My sister is my only close relative among my siblings, and I have always felt a huge responsibility for her well-being. But now I understand that taking care of her includes not only support, but also showing tough love, especially when necessary. After our conversation, we came to the decision that it was better for her to return to our mother. My sister has a job, but she is used to me paying all her expenses, and this has become the norm for her. Now I understand that by my actions I only contributed to her immature behavior. This situation has become a lesson for me. Even if one of your loved ones will always be your family, this does not mean that you need to put up with a lack of respect for your boundaries. This is my house, and, accordingly, these are my rules. My sister is an adult woman, and, of course, she has the right to invite guests, but basic politeness requires that she inform about it in advance. Especially when it comes to strangers. She knew about my rule and was aware of the reasons why I said it. She knew how my past experience of trying to break into a house had left me feeling scared and vulnerable. Despite this, she decided to break this rule anyway, as if my concerns didn't matter. If our mom thinks that such things are insignificant, then maybe my sister really should go back to her. Let her see for herself how long it will take before mom also feels uncomfortable with her behavior. My sister is no longer a teenager, she is 24 years old, and she is expected to have more understanding and respect for others. I was more than generous in letting her live with me for free, despite her constant violation of rules that I thought she understood and shared. I also can't ignore the fact that we are 3 women living alone, and her actions put us all at risk. Bringing a strange man into our house without my knowledge is not just carelessness, it is a serious risk. If she wanted to spend time with this man so much, why didn't she go to him? Perhaps he doesn't have his own place or he already lives with someone else. But whatever the reason, it doesn't excuse her unwillingness to follow my rules. Now I understand that I need to stay firm. This is my home, and my boundaries must be respected. If she can't do that, she'll have to find herself a new place to stay. It doesn't mean that I don't love her or don't want to support her. I just can't let other people, even those close to me, violate my boundaries and undermine my sense of security anymore. If my mom really believes that my sister is still too young to understand the importance of rules and boundaries, then let her take responsibility for her continued living. But I know I'm doing the right thing. This is not a question of pettiness or cruelty, but the need to ensure a safe and peaceful life for yourself and your loved ones. In the end, I want only the best for my sister. But the best way to help her is to make it clear that her actions have consequences. If she is not ready to respect my roles, she will face the reality of independent living. I hope that in the long run it will make her stronger, teach her to respect others, and, most importantly, respect herself.